Griffin was one of the NBA's most exciting stars. That is, until his career was derailed with injuries, causing him to retire ringless.
I'd like to formally announce my retirement.
But today, he's going to get a second chance as a rookie in 2024, where he's drafted second overall by the Hornets, and he'll play out his new career completely injury-free. And while right away his new team looks promising as another Lob City, there were major questions looming around the young Hornets and their work ethic. This will be a big problem for Griffin to solve, as his goal in this video is going to be winning that ring that eluded him for so long in our reality. But for now, he was nowhere close to that goal, and instead will find himself in 2024 as he would start embarking on his new adventure. He had yet to develop a refined skill set, but one thing for sure was that he was a walking highlight. Play after play, he would find himself soaring through the air and punishing any defender that dared to get in his way. Quickly, people started to take notice on his play, and he was becoming a fan favorite.
It's a physical game. Oh, me, oh my! A monster jam by Blake Griffin.
Griffin's jaw-dropping style of play was much welcomed for the league, as they were hitting record high numbers in regular season viewership. But there was also another promising rookie on the radar. Of course, Wemby was taken first overall, and he was thought to be the most talented prospect since LeBron. With his game living up to all the hype, we'd officially have a Rookie of the Year race with constant media coverage. Even though they were both only rookies, already fans were having debates about the two, comparable to debates had about all-time rivals like Curry versus LeBron or Bird versus Magic. This discourse amongst NBA fans will continue all season long, with both players maintaining some very impressive averages. And after what felt like 1,000 mind-boggling plays from Wemby and close to 1,000,000 dunks from Griffin, it was clear this would be a rivalry for years to come. But as of now, only one player can come out on top. It would be Victor Wembanyama, who was taking home the Rookie of the Year honors. Of course, falling short of the reward would sting for Blake, but his main objective was still trying to turn this team around, who by no surprise would be completely missing the playoffs here in 2024. And with the rookie Walter being their only roster change in the offseason, 2025 would roll around, and their only hope was a jump from Griffin. Luckily for all of the fans of Charlotte, Griffin would be doing more than just taking a jump at his game. We'd quickly see his confidence growing this year, and it was apparent in his aggressiveness while attacking the paint, which by no surprise would result in an increase in all of his major statistical averages in comparison to his rookie year. He had successfully avoided the common sophomore slump, and by all accounts, Griffin was having a great year, but he still faced criticism. That's because his friend out west was making an all-star appearance already in just his second year in the league, while Griffin would be missing it in favor of Tatum, Giannis, and Evan Mobley, who all outclassed him at forward. This resulted in the haters being locked in, ready to mock Griffin for falling short of Victor for the second year in a row. And to compound that issue, this Hornets team was still incredibly far from being a threat in the East. Once again, they'd be missing the playoffs altogether, but Blake was refusing to give up. During the next offseason, Griffin spent every waking second of his time relentlessly training in the gym. In our reality, Griffin would expand his game after losing his athleticism with the Pistons, but now in this universe, in just his third year, he was already looking to develop his skill set for another reason. He was being driven by his determination to push ahead of Wembanyama and shake the narrative for him that he was a not as skilled knockoff version of the talented big man. Luckily for Blake, the Hornets also signed veteran Derrick Rose to the team, who would be a major asset in helping Blake develop by mentoring him on the importance of sharpening his skills beyond just the athleticism. This guidance from a veteran may have been exactly what Griffin needed to make the next leap in his career. His entire playstyle was evolving, and he was becoming a versatile threat from anywhere on the court. No longer was Blake just a run and dunk man. Now he was capable of down low in the post with a variety of moves. He had formed a serviceable jumper all the way up to the three, and he was even becoming a threat off the dribble to create his own shot. On top of that, Griffin was finally gaining a small victory with wins over Victor Wembanyama in both of the matchups he had against the Spurs this season, and finally some of the narrative was swinging in his favor. All of this would be enough to now get him into his first All-Star game, but more importantly, his team was actually making the playoffs. And they did more than just make the playoffs, they got the first seed. On top of that, Blake Griffin also got the most improved player, but with little experience, it'll be interesting to see how deep of a run can they make in the postseason. Griffin's playoff debut would be an instant classic. The Hornets were up against the Raptors, who were in the early stages of a rebuild and lacked playoff experience just as much as the Hornets. This gave Blake the opportunity to ease into the playoffs, and the numbers he was putting up on the board had him looking like an experienced vet. He was arguably the best player on the court in this series, and he was happily experiencing some hard-earned success here in round one. But while the Hornets were going to be winning the series, it was much closer than you would expect. And with the second round featuring the defending champion Hawks, many doubted if Charlotte could keep their run going. Just as many had speculated, the Hornets' lack of playoff experience was glaring in this competition, with Trae Young picking away at the inexperienced defense. It was great for Griffin to get his feet wet in the postseason, but this season was coming to an end at the hands of Atlanta. And with Griffin entering the last season of his rookie contract, it'd be a huge year for Blake ahead of free agency in 2027. On top of that, with Charlotte not being the most desirable location to live, the team would make very minimal changes going into the new year. With this rough situation looming, the stakes were incredibly high for Griffin and the Hornets' success this season. If the team completely flops, it's very likely Griffin moves on to another team, which would tear apart the Lob City as we know it. I'm not sure any other player will pair as well as LaMelo has with Griffin, and there's absolutely a possibility that Blake has a decline on another roster not so seamlessly built around him. The pressure was on for the two-time All-Star, and come the postseason, he had a chance to amend last year's shortcoming. Round 2 of the playoffs were against the Donovan Mitchell-led Cavaliers, and Cleveland was very confident in this matchup with Evan Mobley guarding Griffin. Mobley has been in the Defensive Player of the Year race the last few years and will force some misses, but our protagonist wasn't going to be slowing down here. Mobley's defense didn't seem to be altering Griffin's performance in the slightest, which would lead to the Hornets dominating in what was expected to be a very close series between the 2nd and 3rd seeds in the East. After a sweep of this matchup, Blake was heading into his first ever conference finals. But with the Pacers waiting on the other side of things, very quickly the mood would change, because on the road in both of the first 2 games, the Pacers would be winning and taking a commanding lead. And with this series moving out to Indy for Game 3, Griffin was doing something unheard of. In the middle of the playoffs, Griffin was announcing that he will re-sign with Charlotte and encourage the team to focus on the now. After losing Game 2, Blake comes out and says, "Don't even worry about the offseason, fellas. I'm coming back next year." He's trying to get into these finals, trying to get his team in the right headspace, but it's a risky move for him because other teams now aren't going to be offering him all that money, and he could be taking a big hit on the bottom dollar. But let's see if it pays off, and maybe he can get a championship. Only time will tell, but it definitely seemed like the strategy was working out for Charlotte. They were fighting back even on the road against the Pacers, and over the course of the next 4 games, they'd end up winning 3, which would force a Game 7. Being only 1 win away from the finals, Griffin and his teammates were beyond thrilled for this match. It was their first Game 7, but they were hoping to stay calm and collected. Their offense was firing on all cylinders, and they were continuing to push the needle for the entire 48 minutes. However, despite their great play, this wasn't a walk in the park. Indiana was in the exact same boat. They were also elated being 1 win shy of meeting the Thunder in the finals, and they'd be fighting back just as hard. With the game tied with 30 seconds remaining, Halliburton would have the ball in his hands and sink a 3 that would lead the Hornets only seconds to save their season. They'd call timeout and prepare for possibly the biggest possession in their franchise history. With only 15.5 seconds left, Blake Griffin and the Hornets have one final chance here to tie the game, maybe take the lead in a 2-for-1 possession here. They're driving into the paint. Blake Griffin open for the 3. He pulls it. Blake gets the 3 in. 9 seconds remaining. The Pacers have no timeouts. Blake Griffin ties the game for a possible trip to the NBA Finals. Vucevic the screen. Mather the deep 3. It's off. We're headed to overtime. Griffin with the huge shot. But unfortunately, that overtime was one-sided, with the Pacers easily winning for a trip to the finals. This was, of course, a huge disappointment to Blake, but with such a young core, they'd have plenty more chances coming. But as they would find themselves in the playoffs once more in 2028 against another East team that seemed to be a step ahead, you have to wonder if that young core is good enough to get it done. It sure wasn't enough here this season, as the Hornets dropped to now a 6th seed, and in the second round, they'd face defeat again during their series with the Bulls. However, resiliency has been the moral of the story so far, and it wasn't changing in 2029. During the first round, they had a rematch against the Pacers that was alarmingly scary. Indiana was up to 2-0 to kick things off, and it looked like a repeat of 2027. But Charlotte would get their act together and get their revenge after 6 games. And their revenge tour had an opportunity to continue in the second round against the first-seeded Hawks. If you recall, back in 2026, the Hawks were the lower seed, taking out the Hornets in just the second round. The only difference this time is the Hawks were built around Paolo instead of Trae. Griffin and Banchero would be battling it out versus each other the entire series, but LaMelo Ball seemed to be the major difference maker in this series, as he led all players in points, which was enough to get by Atlanta in 5 for a trip to the conference finals that would offer yet another chance at revenge against the Bulls. Griffin and the Hornets really looked like they were finally taking that step, but as you know, history repeats itself. Again, the Hornets were facing a Game 7 in the conference finals. This time it would be against the Bulls though, and they didn't let Charlotte stick around as long as the Pacers did in 27. They were in complete control of this match from start to finish to earn the win, but Griffin wasn't to blame. You really can't blame Blake Griffin. 42 points in a game 7. I'm just not sure this team is good enough to get things done. Our challenge of him getting a ring, it might not be achievable. It might be slipping out of his hands here. He's still young though. He's got plenty of time. Moving into the next season, maybe they can finally make some progress. Honestly, going into next season, I had my doubts about Blake. Sure, he was a great player who has developed his game immensely since his rookie debut, but did he really have that X factor needed to propel a team from perennial playoff appearance to legitimate true contenders to win a ring? Up until now, I'd say the answer was no, but something was different this season. Griffin appeared to be more focused, more intent with his actions, and more precise with his offense. He hadn't made any large improvements to his game, but everyone could tell this wasn't the same Blake from last year. He was doing his same old moves, however, everything flowed more efficiently. By the end of the year, he has produced without a doubt the best season so far of his career, and it certainly showed as he was being awarded the Most Valuable Player award. Honestly, didn't think Blake Griffin was going to get an MVP in this sim, but he definitely deserved it. 26, 11, and 8 on 50-40 splits. Pretty solid regular season. However, we already know he could perform great in the regular season. Now we need to see the same production through a playoff run, even if he already had some doubters.
Gonna be sitting on the sideline after the first round of the playoffs.
It wouldn't be long before Barkley was eating his own words, because with the Hornets facing the Pacers for another year, they had experience going up against this team and would be defeating them again to get by round 1. In the second round, Charlotte was facing a brand new foe out in Boston, but the results were still the same, with Griffin maintaining his high level of play, and they'd be passing the Celtics up to then compete in the conference finals for the 3rd time. In the past, Griffin fell to some very talented teams in game 7s of the conference finals, but this time it was the 7th seeded Heat, whose best player was Bam Adebayo. I'm not sure how Miami even made it this far, but without a doubt, this was the easiest matchup Blake has had at this point of the playoffs. It was now or never for the Hornets to make it to the finals. If they failed to execute in this moment, Griffin will be hearing about it from the fans for the rest of his career. With the future of his legacy on the line, he'd do exactly what he needed to do in order to overcome Miami. It was a clean sweep, and now there was only one final hurdle between him and getting that ring. Victor Wembanyama. Oh, and he wasn't alone either. This literally cannot be serious. After years of the back and forth exchanges of who was better between Victor and Blake, it finally now all comes down to this. So many years ago, they had an intense race to the Rookie of the Year, and now they were here having a race to each of their first rings in the NBA. Both of these players were the leaders of their teams and were fighting hard to get that ultimate prize. Their stats were reflecting their level of skill, and while Griffin was outdoing Wembanyama in most of the stats, a lot of it was, of course, due to the shared ball with Luka. But don't let those shared stats fool you, because it was Victor and his Spurs who were going to be in control of this series here, up 3-2, and unless Griffin has a miracle up his sleeve, this one could be over. Wembanyama and Griffin have been battling it out all series, but now the Spurs are up by 4, 1 win away from a ring. So unless the Hornets can make some kind of comeback here in the last 48 seconds, these Spurs are going home champions, and Blake Griffin is losing his first finals. They throw it over here to Aloe Sin. Blake Griffin trying to get the backdoor cut is not there. Porter Jr. has it. Blake Griffin coming up. Wemby on him. The pull-up J. He gets it in to put this thing within 2. The Spurs with the ball. Now you get a stop and you actually have a chance to tie or take the lead. You just need a stop here. It's going to be easier said than done. Wembanyama with the screen. You got the point guard here driving in. Porter on him. He strips him. He strips him. Oh, there was a foul. There was a foul. Collier hit both of his free throws. I feel like in this situation, you kind of need a 3 foul and another 3 to try to send this thing into overtime. I don't know if you have time to go for a 2. They throw it into Hunter here. They throw it down low to Walter, the young player Walter. He's losing his hand. Oh, he throws it up. He just flicks it up, but somehow gets it to go. They got the full court press going 20 seconds. They're fouling Collier again. He made the first. They need him to miss this one. They're out of timeouts. They don't have a lot of time to play with. LaMelo Ball just fouled out. It's off. It's off. It's actually off. Griffin has it. They're down by 3. They can tie it. They can tie it in this huge game. Griffin's biggest game of his career. Knicks from 3. Bang! It's a tied ball game. I don't even know who Knicks is, but he may have just saved the season for the Hornets and Griffin. The Spurs have it now. Collier with the ball. He's trying to drive it in, nowhere to go. Wembanyama standing there on the block. Wembanyama send the screen. Collier to pull up 3. It's off. We're headed to an overtime. But now with LaMelo Ball and Porter both fouled out, the Spurs were able to break away in the overtime, and once again, Griffin loses a critical game in the extra period. Blake was incredibly close and came up just short, but the show must go on. The rematches between Charlotte and San Antonio during the next season brought a ton of buzz with the continued conflict, and it was so much that even NBA 2K put both athletes on the cover of NBA 2K31 for their brand new rivalry edition. And that cover would be a foreshadowing of what's to come, because again, Griffin was making his way through the East to make it to the the finals once more, where he'd meet the seemingly insurmountable hurdle for the second year in a row. Luckily for him, though, the Hornets added a Okongwu to attempt to slow down Wemby, and that really seemed to be the difference maker, because now Blake Griffin was finally taking that final lead. He was chipping away through this series, and it was his moment. It was now. He was defeating his rival and finally completing his objective of winning a ring. Now NBA history has been changed, but what about NBA history if LeBron James never played in the NBA? Find out by clicking this video next.